Welcome back to Identity Stack. This is Dr. Sarah Austin, technical writer at Key Data Cyber. This time, I'm thrilled to be joined by Brian Reed, Chief Technology Officer at Key Data Cyber, to talk about what just-in-time access is and why it is the future of access control. Thank you so much for joining me, Brian.
Happy to be here, Sarah, and happy to be talking to you about just-in-time access.
Great, thank you. For listeners new to the topic, what exactly is just-in-time access and how does it differ from traditional privileged access models?
Yeah, so in its simplest form, a just-in-time access model is one where the entitlements are granted to the users in real time. So you just get the access you need when you need it. So in other words, you're only granted your entitlements when you require them and only for the duration that you need to perform your tasks. In the standing access model, users get their credential and then that account has the entitlements assigned to it permanently, whether the user requires them for that period or not, so they're assigned permanently. In terms of how it's implemented, in the real world, just-in-time workflows can be implemented natively with the technology that you're using, but more commonly, it's an add-on like a third-party privileged access management solution or identity and access or access management tool. Really, it's a fairly new concept, so legacy technologies quite often don't have just-in-time capabilities, so they need to be layered on with other tools.
So why is just-in-time access important? What's wrong with the historical standing access model that you just described?
Yeah, so when you think about it, if you have highly privileged accounts that are assigned entitlements 24/7, that makes them a really high-value target for attackers. So if one of these privileged accounts is compromised, the attacker instantly gets access to powerful entitlements permanently. So MFA might help to reduce the risk of privileged access with these types of accounts, but attackers are also proving that MFA isn't a cure-all, and organizations struggle to implement MFA in all of their different places anyways. Just-in-time access drastically reduces the window of opportunity for that attacker if an account is stolen. For example, if you've got a privileged account that is only quote-unquote privileged for a few hours a day, then even if that's lost to an attacker, that attacker has a very small window to exploit that account.
So what are some best practices around a real-world just-in-time workflow?
Yeah, so we can talk about some of the high-level concepts, and then maybe later we can drill down into the particular technologies. But there's some things to keep in mind just at a high level. So just-in-time access works best when the window of attack is kept small. So people should really only be requesting the permissions that they need when they need them. And as soon as their task or session is complete, those rights should be revoked. So keeping that window where the user is elevated small is one of the first best practices to try and strive for. Another best practice is that every just-in-time workflow should require strong authentication. Users are going to be elevating their access, so we really need to take pains to make sure that user is who they say they are, and they've got a proper policy in place to allow them to elevate just in time at that moment. So not only should you be implementing MFA, you should also be layering on other forms of conditional access based on other factors like device health and network location or their risk score as well. Another best practice is real-time approval with a human approver. So for your most important just-in-time workflows, maybe a human being should be the final check to actually allow that user to give them the ability to elevate just in time. Unfortunately, this introduces some friction into the process as a human approver needs to be available to approve that request. So it's not always practical. Lastly, entitlements should be automatically revoked once the user's session or task or time limit expires. There shouldn't be any manual cleanup required. That's more of a trademark of older just-in-time workflows where you need to go in and clean up the access when the user's done. It should be all an automated process of granting the access to the user and revoking the access to the user in real time. One sort of forgotten best practice as well is that organizations should review their just-in-time policies periodically to ensure that they align with the security requirements and what their users actually need. This should be a dynamic and constantly maturing initiative. So it's always best to visit your just-in-time policies, keep trying to expand them and mature them. Unfortunately, not all of these best practices are available today in all of the different technologies that you may want to implement just-in-time workflows on. So you might need some compensating controls to kind of try and meet these best practices where the technologies are today and implement just-in-time with the types of tools that you've got.
So, can you walk us through a simple example of how just-in-time access would work for an administrator needing elevated privileges?
Sure, examples are great. Let's say I'm a Windows Server administrator. In the past, I probably would have been just given the Windows Server entitlement right to my eData account, and that entitlement would be attached to my account with the ability to RDP to a Windows Server pretty much for as long as I was employed in that role at Keydata. If the account was ever stolen, an attacker would have a lot of time to exploit that account and perform that activity. So if you use more of a just-in-time workflow, I would not be granted that right to my account. I wouldn't be able to RDP to any sensitive servers unless I executed the just-in-time access request. So if I sit down to perform my work, I would need to initiate that, which could be going to an access portal, filling out the request to signal my intention that I want to RDP to a sensitive server. I'd probably be prompted for MFA. I might get other criteria like a reason. There might be a human approval involved. Whatever the level of friction is that is kind of matches what I'm trying to do. And only then would I receive my ability to log into the server. That's the difference. And most importantly, once my RDP session was over and I'd finished my tasks, that entitlement would be revoked. So I would no longer be able to perform that activity again without initiating the request again. And what that means is the attacker would also not be able to initiate anything with that account once it was no longer privileged. There are a lot of variations on how the access is requested and on how temporary entitlements can be granted. The key is matching the security controls to the way that users need to work. We all know that burdening admins with a lot of extra process doesn't work. So keeping user friction in mind is important.
So take us behind the scenes. How is just-in-time access implemented? What are some examples?
Yeah, this is a really good question. Unfortunately, the phrase just in time is becoming a bit of a marketing buzzword for some of the vendors, and you'll definitely find that what one vendor might call just in time access might be different than what another vendor considers just in time access. But how it's facilitated really depends on the capabilities of the target technology. So if you're trying to access a Windows or a Linux or an SAP or a mainframe, you're going to have different capabilities between those different technologies. It also depends if you've got any third-party tools like an enterprise PAM solution or an enterprise IGA solution within your organization as well. So the gold standard of just-in-time access, like I said earlier, is having a privilege entitlement exist only for a single session. How is that implemented? Typically behind the scenes, it's implemented by either creating a temporary new account. So when I go to access my Windows server, an account is created on that server and I'm given the ability to log in using that account. When I'm done, that account is deleted. That's a simple implementation to conceptualize. Another common way to implement just-in-time access is using my existing account, not creating a new account, but using my existing account and simply assigning those entitlements to my existing account. So I use my same traditional account, but it gains entitlements either by being put into a group or a new role for the period that I need it for the duration of that session. Session-based just-in-time is very sophisticated, and it usually requires an enterprise PAM tool like CyberArk or BeyondTrust to implement. And even then, even if you have an enterprise PAM tool, it may not be possible for all the different types of credentials in your organization to implement session-based just-in-time access.
What about just-in-time features that customers can implement without having an enterprise PAM tool?
Yeah, I don't want to leave the listeners with the idea that you absolutely need an enterprise PAM tool to perform any sort of just-in-time access, but it does help. The next level down for just-in-time workflows is what we would call time-bound access. So your ability to have a privilege entitlement is limited by a particular time frame. This is a bit easier to implement because it's not as sophisticated as a session-based just-in-time. And this can be found as a native feature with some technologies. For example, Entra PIM, in the cloud world from Microsoft is time-bound privileged access. SAP, to give you an on-prem example, also has, this sort of workflow where you can be given administrator access for a certain period of time. So I have seen time-bound access in sort of native features within different products. It's just not as sophisticated as the session-based access that you can get by an enterprise PAM tool. As well, if you've got IGA tools or access management tools like SailPoint or Okta, they give you the ability to sign entitlements for a limited time window as well. So you can do some of that time-based elevation using IGA tools and access management tools out of the box. It's important really to also say that even if you can't do any of these things, even if your technology doesn't support any form of just-in-time access, there still may be options. For example, using credential rotation for legacy technologies is kind of a way of getting some sort of just-in-time access out of a legacy technology that doesn't have any of these types of features. Again, now we're back to this is mainly done with an enterprise PAM tool, sort of password rotation and password injection. You can also do it using some zero trust network access tools like Palo Alto or Zscaler. But it's debatable if you can actually call these different techniques, pure just-in-time access. But they do work with legacy technology as a form of basic temporary rights assignment, let's call it. And it's important to just note that for some legacy technologies, there's always some way of doing better in terms of just-in-time access, whether it's bolting on something from an enterprise PAM solution or using the native features. There's very few privileged access workflows nowadays that can't be implement some sort of just-in-time access through tools that are available.
So, from an organization's perspective, what are the measurable benefits of implementing just-in-time access, both in terms of their security posture and their operational efficiency?
Yeah, so typically when key data is asked by an organization that's investigating just-in-time access, we like to focus on the problems that they're trying to solve. Typically, we find that 90% of the time with our customers, it's all about reducing risk for one or more of their core admin workflows, usually as a result of a compliance or some sort of an audit finding. So, we usually start with the problem that they're trying to solve, and usually that problem focuses around risks. Security teams love the risk reduction, there's no doubt about that, and that's what drives a lot of our discussion with clients. But, as well, business leaders want some hard numbers around that. One of the most obvious measurable benefits that you're going to get is a reduction in fewer standing entitlements. So in other words, you've taken the most privileged accounts in your organization and you've turned them into non-privileged accounts. That is huge. You've reduced your attack footprint dramatically, and you can measure that. You can measure with before and after snapshot of account numbers. Some other kind of unseen numbers that you can also measure are metrics around faster onboarding for critical admin work. You're going to simplify the user's admin workflows by automating the whole just-in-time process. And in that way, you can measure your speed of onboarding and the streamlined ability to perform administrative actions. Of course, there's also going to be fewer audit findings to remediate because, again, you've dramatically reduced your attack footprint. So a lot of the audit findings that you've been getting sign off on for the last little while can just vanish. One hidden benefit of just-in-time access is visibility that you get into your just-in-time elevations. So it'll give you some amazing insights into who is using their privileged entitlements and why they are using them. So some organizations find that this benefit alone is worth the cost of implementing just-in-time access, because it's very difficult to see what privileges are being exercised on a daily basis, but just-in-time puts that gateway in place with some auditing that allows you to really put some analysis around that. So just-in-time access, can deliver all of these different benefits if it's done right, and all of these benefits are measurable.
So, what would you recommend that an organization action today to start investigating just-in-time access?
Well, it sounds a bit boring, but the biggest thing an organization can do is start to consider the benefits that just-in-time access would bring to their key admin workflows, and just build a business case around the risk, the efficiency, and the compliance benefits that they're going to receive. That's a good starting point that can put some scope around your ability to get the tools and processes in place to implement just-in-time. Next is then to take stock of the tools that you may already own. Consider supplementing any gaps with an enterprise PAM tool or an IGA tool, but certainly you might have some capabilities already within your organization, even if you don't own those enterprise class tools. Some things to remember as you start down your journey is, again, it may not be possible to implement the most sophisticated forms of just-in-time access on all of your core admin workflows, especially if they're more legacy-based technologies. But it's important to remember that every single privileged workflow that you have within your organization today can probably be improved and matured over time with the just-in-time tools that are available on the market today. And at Key Data, we get in with customers and perform these types of maturity investments and suggest areas where they can get some quick wins and build a roadmap to mature their privileged access management, in particular, using just-in-time adoption.
Brian, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and insights with us today. It's been incredibly valuable. And to our listeners, if you want to learn more about how just-in-time access controls can improve security for your organization, be sure to visit us at keydatacyber.com, where you can schedule a complimentary workshop to assess your security needs and receive a roadmap to a secure, scalable IAM strategy for your organization.